All right. Well, hi, everyone. And we're back here with Diamond Hands Tejani, CEO of Victory Square Technologies. We're answering some of your most common questions. And as a reminder for anyone, if you're looking for the stock, it trades in Canada with the ticker VST.CN. For our American friends, VSQTF. So, Shaf, thanks so much for taking some time with us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Always a pleasure. So, okay, let's jump right in. Victory Square Health, can you just give us a bit of a status update on where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just start off with a quick refresher. So Victory Square Health designs rapid diagnostic tests to identify infectious diseases for immediate and specific treatment. So that's what they do. Earlier in their business cycle, they had been working around diseases such as, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but leishmaniasis, dengue fever, Zika, yellow fever, syphilis, HIV. And last year, based on the research they were doing, they were able to create a 15-minute antibody rapid test for COVID. And that's what I think got them a lot of attention. And what Victory Square Health was able to do with that was establish very strong relationships with regulatory bodies, specifically in Brazil, because the parent company is based in Brazil. So they established relationships with the regulatory body, really strong manufacturing partners for not just Brazil, but the Mercosur countries, and distribution in Brazil and the rest of Latin America and South America, and also Europe and the US around their COVID rapid test kits, because that's what was where all the demand was for that. Since then, they've been selling tests through those channels, but they've been using that kind of breakthrough to start building out other types of products and services in the digital health space in Brazil. We're based in Vancouver, so we've seen what's happened in the digital health or telehealth space or diagnostic space in not just Canada, but the US as well. The growth, the funding, the valuations. So what VSH is trying to recreate in Brazil is to be a first mover for diagnostic testing and telehealth in Brazil and kind of surrounding areas. So that's where they've spent most of their time, kind of focusing in taking advantage of all this momentum that, was created around that one COVID rapid test for them. So we're super excited. Just a quick side note, they partnered up with one of our companies, Hydrate, which is, again, we acquired in January, to license some of their on-site, on-demand telehealth products and services for Brazil. So super excited about that.
Excellent. And, maybe that's a good segue into the next question. In terms of the remainder of this year, can you give us a bit of an idea of what some of the potential next most likely spin-outs might be?
Absolutely. So we recently spun out Game On, which went public on June 1st. There are 4 more companies right now that are in the hopper to be listed by the end of this year, potentially January of next year. And in this order, so Immersive Technologies is the next that's queued up. We actually filed the prospectus for them, I believe, last week. So wheels are in motion. We're anticipating them being public by July or August of this year. Then the next will be Stardust Solar. Stardust Solar should be listed by October, November of this year. And then Turnium is another portfolio company, which should be listed, I would say, November, December. And then Copilot Advisors, which should be, December of this year, potentially January of next year. So those are the 4 that we currently have kind of teed up to be spun off next.
Excellent. Now I'm going to make a quick little comment for those watching. I know sometimes investors will live and die by the specific dates that you give them. A message to you at home. A lot of this is not dependent on the company's ability to file on time. Things like legal, audit, exchanges, all of that can create a backlog when they're particularly busy, as they are now. So take this as a general guideline, but please don't hold out any guns if there's a slight adjustment. So I just wanted to leave that note out there. Next question, I'll give you guys a chance to have a little humble brag opportunity. I mean, Q1 here, that cemented the 5th consecutive quarter with positive earnings per share. Frankly, something you don't really ever see in a microcap stock. So maybe are there a few key financial takeaways you really want to make sure that investors are aware of?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned one big one. So consistency is important for us. So 5 consecutive quarters of positive net income and earnings per share is, a big deal. I think it shows more of a pattern than one-off or anomaly. So I think that's a really important kind of high-level metric. Our last audited financials, which were released on April 30th, was for fiscal 2020. I think we posted 16.3 million Canadian of positive net income and earnings per share of about 25 cents. So again, very, very healthy balance sheet. We recently filed our Q1s, which represented the 5th consecutive quarter, which came out on May 30th. All of these are actually up on SEDAR as we're up to date with our filings. But we posted adjusted net income gain of around just over $5 million, and I think it was around 5 or 6 cents a share, and cash and cash equivalents of around 10 million. So again, very healthy balance sheet, for us. A couple of other, really key things that I'll just point out. We issued out a dividend. So in addition to posting 5 consecutive quarters or having positive net income or positive earnings per share, we paid a share dividend this year, which was with Game On share. So again, that's another very rare thing for, I think, a small cap or micro cap company to do. Currently our unaudited NAV sits at around 196 million Canadian. So that's a really big number, especially given that our market cap is probably around $64 million right now. So a big disconnect. And our PE ratio is probably 2.6. So the average for tech companies is usually 17 plus. So those are some pretty important, I think, highlights that investors should know about Victory Square.
And I challenge anyone else to find a microcap that even has a PE ratio to reference. So yeah. I'm going to change the order of the questions a little bit here. You mentioned a dividend, so why don't we just jump into that right now? The share dividend, that's a new concept for some people. I think the cash dividend, everybody knows what that is. Let's talk about the share dividend of Game On. So that seemed to have correlated with a bit of a drop in the price of Game On and VST. Can you maybe speak to a possible reason there might have been that price movement?
We've been getting this question asked a lot. Specifically, do we think the dividend was a bad idea, or why isn't the share price moving up, or why isn't being reflected better? The response to that, I probably kind of answered in two ways. One from a company perspective, and one from an investor's perspective. So from a company's perspective, we've set out with a kind of a long-term vision for Victory Square. We've put together a roadmap and game plan for that. We've brought on a team and continue to do so to help execute on that game plan. And all we can really control is execution. As long as we execute and the KPIs in the business, which we kind of referenced earlier, are going in the right direction. And we're communicating that on a regular basis. So communicating that with what you and I are doing today, or the Lithium conference, which we just participated in, or regularly communicating through news releases and updating shareholders and share owners. That's pretty much what we can do. We don't get too caught up in the day-to-day share price. What I've experienced is the market sometimes doesn't get it right in the short term, but in the long term it does. And so there's this Warren Buffett quote, and I think it says that the market can price things wrong, where price is what you pay, value is what you get. So in other words, don't focus kind of on the short term swings in price. Focus on the underlying value of your investment. So from a company perspective, for us, we think the share dividend is a good idea. And as we continue to execute and spin companies off and unlock value for Victory Square, we'll continue to do that because we think it's a great way to reward those long-term patient shareholders, as they follow our story as we continue to kind of grow Victory Square. Now, from an investor's perspective, so as the largest investor and just an investor in general, I mean, here's what I look at when I look at a company. I mean, one, is there an opportunity for substantial appreciation, while maintaining a margin of safety? So in that respect, we have a very good entry point, and we're not a one-trick pony. So the margin of safety is diversified amongst 28 different kind of portfolio companies. Does the business have the ability to create strong cash flow? Well, when our assets get spun off, we can liquidate them at a higher value and reinvest. So we've built this kind of self-sustaining model to be able to push out cash flow to be able to reinvest. So we're not at the mercy of the share price or external financing. Can we reinvest? Can a business reinvest its cash flow at high rates of return? And obviously we've seen that we're great allocators of capital, and there's no shortage of really, really good entry points that we're seeing in deal flow we're seeing. The management team, strong insider ownership. Victory Square, there's alignments. We've got skin in the game. So it's not some random C-suite group of people running a company. We've got money in this and believe long term. But even more importantly, is the company underfollowed? When I look, I don't usually chase a stock. I look for opportunities where people aren't seeing them yet. Generally, those underfollowed companies are undervalued. So, as an investor, these are things I look at. So when I think people kind of reference the swing in share price or why isn't our share price moving higher, or did the dividend do that? To me, the fundamentals are solid. I think a dividend is a good idea long term. I mean, most sophisticated investors, they specifically look for companies that have positive earnings per share or low, they're underfollowed, undervalued, and pay out a dividend. So for me, I think these are key elements that I think long term are going to translate into a healthier share price that's probably more in line with what the underlying assets are worth.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. So kind of speaking of your portfolio, so let's talk about some of your recent investments. So for example, in April, VST invested in a renewable energy play, Stardust Solar. As a company, do you plan to continue investing in renewable energy companies? Is that something that's still on your radar?
Yeah, so all of our investments are based around quality of life, improving the way people kind of work, play, eat, and communicate. And so renewables or climate change, or addressing the climate change emergency, I think is I've said this before, is I think our survival as a species will depend on addressing this issue. So renewables and the circular economy, for us, that is a focus today, and will continue to be a focus. But I just want to point out that it's simply not just an environmental issue. We believe it's a massive economic opportunity. We've seen estimates going forward that in terms of size, and the prize for countries that are in the game early, developing technologies and innovations that can address some of these climate issues, is estimated to be a $26 trillion plus opportunity. So for us, it's important. It's part of our DNA to address or invest in projects that are going to improve that are based on quality of life. But we also see this as a huge opportunity, and we'll continue to aggressively pursue opportunities in it.
And while we're on the topic of Stardust Solar, for anybody watching right now that's not overly familiar with this company, can you just give us a quick little overview of what they are and just an update on where they're at right now?
Yeah, so a couple of interesting tidbits on Stardust Solar. The founder, Mark Tadros, this is the second go-around that we had with him. We had a really successful investment and exit with him a couple of years ago in the fantasy sports space. So he's coming back for more. So again, there's a comfort level. We've worked with him and been successful. He built Stardust Solar. Initially, what he had done is he built a teaching school. So we had a teaching school here in Western Canada that would educate people that wanted to learn how to be solar installers. Then once the students would graduate, he would then help them, gain employment, and then help source product from manufacturers to install. He then expanded and bought another school in Ontario. So he had East and Western Canada kind of covered, where I think he's had over 2,000 students that have kind of come through and been educated through his program. What he started to see then was building a franchise model for all those graduates. So as those students would graduate, they could, leverage the reputation and brand that Stardust has to open up franchises in different areas across Canada to start with, and then, expand to the US. And then he, after setting up the franchise model, he started to be generating a lot of business for some of the manufacturers in the solar space, as he was pushing product to all of the franchisees. And so he started to establish and invest in on the solar manufacturing side. And with solar, he started to see other opportunities in EV battery charging and other types of verticals. So he has built this great business. It generates revenue. It's cash flow positive, but he sees an opportunity to scale. And for VST, we took a material stake in investment, which we just closed, and we're going to provide him with some capital. We're going to take him public in, I think, October and November of this year. But the goal is to give him some capital to pour rocket fuel on this foundation that he's built, to continue to grow and scale his business, because we think that it's a great time and great opportunity for him, and he's already built a very strong foundation. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. With respect to the exciting things that are happening in the business on a go-forward basis, we'll have an update from Mark directly, which we'll share with shareholders, which I think will be exciting. But a couple of last points. We just closed our investment on them. The goal is to have them listed by October, November of this year. We will pay a share dividend out in Stardust Solar as well. So in our investors and our share owners can keep a lookout for that. So.
Excellent. So great, Shaf, that was exactly the overview we're looking for. Maybe before we sign off here, any kind of final words, things that you'd like to say to a VST shareholder about where you guys are at?
Yeah, I think, again, thank you for all the patience and support. I think we're still in the first inning. We, the 5 consecutive quarters, for us, that was a big thing, because it was something it's fundamental. A lot of times the CEO can come and say, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C. For us to actually deliver fundamental numbers were important. To issue a share dividend was important for us. These are things that, it's important for us that when we say we're going to do something, that we actually execute and do it. So I think for our share owners, again, we're very appreciative for their support. Keep following the story, and I think look at our actions. We really want to be judged on our execution and our actions and our deliverables. So, when we mentioned I know you gave us a great plug there that things don't always happen on time, but for us, it's important that as we look towards the last half of the year, spitting out Immersive, Stardust, Copilot, and Eternium, and issuing a share dividend and continuing to produce positive results for the rest of the year. Those are things that, those are actions that I would, suggest shareholders watch the story, and we want to be held accountable for those things. So again, looking forward to the next 6 months and seeing some of these things come to fruition.
As am I. Well, okay. Thank you, Shaf. And again, at home, the ticker symbol in Canada, VST.CN. And for our American friends, it is VSQTF. Victory Square's Technologies. Wow, I butchered that. Victory Square Technologies. Keep it on your radar. Don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Shaf, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks, brother.